The journal. Well, it all started because I complained about the standard of English in the annual reports. They were shocking. They were illiterate, they were ungrammatical, they were misspelled, and I wrote off to Wellington, to the executive, and said, if we are aiming to be a learned profession, or seeming to be one, we should at least get our printed word properly organised. And I actually sent a copy of the reports down, full of red ink corrections, all the way through. The only one that got through without completely unscathed was good old Margot Skinner. I actually remember writing, "Well done, Margot," at the bottom of her contribution. I think it was about WCPT, even in those days. As a result of which, I was asked if I'd like to serve on the editorial committee. Lamont was on that, and the editor at the time was Rocky Loudon out in Glen Eden way somewhere. He wanted to give it up. After I'd been there a year, he decided to hand over. I think he'd been there a couple of years or 3, and I was asked if I'd like to do it. So I took it on, and I thought, well, I'll give it a couple of years or something, and 9 years later I finally handed over with an editorial entitled "Time for a Change." So I took it out to Sandra Bassett. Well, during those 9 years it was very difficult to get contributions. We were at this dilemma, or the catch-22 situation, of not attracting high-class contributions because people wanted to publish in prestigious publications. So you didn't get prestigious stuff to publish. You sort of whacked on itself all the time. But nobody is going to publish in other than a prestigious, so you won't get prestigious stuff. Therefore, you're stuck in the non-prestigious area. It's rather like being second division in football, and all that sort of thing. If you do get to first division, you get kicked to death, and so forth and so on. However, these were the days, of course, when physiotherapy was not a university course, and people had no exposure to research papers or anything else. Not even reading them to some extent. They didn't know how to read them. They didn't know anything about statistics. And I think, obviously, the journal has taken a completely different line since we now have our own PhDs wandering around and doing research and reporting on it. In fact, I think we can even be, I'm not sure how much the current editor gets that does not get accepted, because I'm still playing a part there and being the copy editor that is, before it finally goes to print, I have everything sent to me electronically and in hard copy, because it is difficult to work on screen, that sort of thing, and go through it with my red pen ever poised in order to knock out the superfluous apostrophes, usually in the word IT apostrophe S, and any other spelling errors or grammatical errors. And there's also, of course, the question of tidying up, if you have to do it, or regularising spelling systems. For instance, you might get somebody to submit a paper from America who leave off the ligatures in word like edema, spell them with E-D-E-N-A, and so forth and so on. You've got to be a bit careful doing that, otherwise people get the impression that you're trying to convert them to a different form of English, and they can't look them up in their word book if it's starting with a different letter. However, we do stick to the Oxford book. An interesting thing there, that a lot of people think the word such as realise and advertise and so forth should be spelt with an S, and to do it with a Z is actually an Americanism. In fact, it isn't. If you look at Oxford, the OED, you'll find that IZE is the standard English, except for certain words with a French background where the ISE is necessary. So I was almost tempted once to change a ZE, an IZE in an American paper, but I thought I would look it up just in case I came across this interesting fact. So I would have been quite wrong to have altered it, because it was doubly right. It was his right way of spelling it, and it technically is the English right way of spelling it. Papers were difficult to get together, and the peer review system was pretty sort of ad hoc. You know, we'd farm it off, a paper on some topic, to somebody who might know something about this particular thing, but there was no format to it. They write what they thought and so forth and so on, and you'd have the joy of saying, no, you can't have this published in our journal, thank you very much. There was a lot of stuff sent in from people overseas whose first language was not English, and they posed problems too, because it was obviously not English. There was a famous paper from Holland, it wasn't famous, it was in my book, whose conclusions in English or Dutch were quite wrong. I thought we wouldn't publish it, but that was the let out, that it wasn't written in standard English. Funnily enough, it later got put in the Chartered Society Journal. I don't know how they managed to get it across there, but it was the same paper, obviously, and it hadn't been altered in any way to take the language into account. There was a gentleman in one of the African countries, whose name escapes me, who was sweating on publish or perish in some university setting. He came out with some magnificent papers written in, I don't know what the, the form was. Paragraphing would be the abstract, then the introduction, the method, the discussion, the results, then the discussion. And we had to sort of politely reject those for much the same reason. I don't think we have any mandate to sit down and rewrite what people have written. You know, either they do it or whatever. It doesn't get done. I'm limited even now. There are several things I'm strongly tempted, you know, to wrench sentences around so they've got a nice tight sentence instead of one that meanders all over the page. But I don't do it for that reason. That it's their prose, not mine.